And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. So glad that you're with us this week. As always, remember that as you join us, you can comment and ask questions during the show. Don't feel that you're interrupting us at all. We love your comments and your questions each and every week, and they just get better and better. Bill, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing good. Me and Alan are batching it this week. The women folk are away, getting ready for some things that we have going on, and so we're we're running around with scissors, leaving the lights and doors open and on, and the refrigerator doors open, and so we'll have a lot of dishes to wash in a few days.
Try not to burn the house down, okay? Just have some place that she can come home to. All right.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, so that's why I haven't shaved today. It's like, I don't have to impress anybody today. So
hopefully, that she's not watching this today, so that she doesn't freak out and know.
She'll watch it later. But she already knows. She already knows.
She already knows.
So me and Alan are just just doing whatever.
Just doing whatever. Eating at McDonald's, I hope not. But anyway.
No. Wouldn't take it that far.
Wouldn't take it that far. Well, good. Well, at least we have some boundaries left, right? So
there are a few, yeah.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, as we always do. And the most, I think, exciting news, I don't know, in a long time, maybe since Reagan, is the Trump-Kim summit that took place yesterday in Singapore, that everybody said was something that just wasn't going to happen.
Well, it happened. Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of happened so fast, you kind of hardly know how to, process it and analyze it, but which.
The mainstream media knows how, Bill. They just don't mention it like it never happened. So that's how they do it.
Well, what I was going to say is, I mean, considering that just a few months ago, he was calling him Rocket Man or Rocket Boy or whatever it was, and people were thinking that we might be on the verge of some kind of military action. In fact, I understood that Nikki Haley had kind of basically said as much, to the UN several months ago, that North Korea was just one, slip up away from the United States taking military action. So it's come a long way really fast, and I'm not going to be dogmatic about this, but the fact that it's happening so quickly and so dramatically almost kind of makes me think that God's really behind all of this. God might be doing something here, because when he does something, it's very sudden. So anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's fantastic what we're seeing. I mean, all the naysayers, I can't begin to tell you how many people before the summit, moments away, said it wasn't going to happen. Moments away said, look, if they're going to go in here and they're going to talk, they're not going to really get anything done. This is something that's going to take years. This is maybe just a small foot in the door, which always, is an indication of how they undervalue Trump. They don't understand Trump. They don't know what he does. For me, I was looking at it like this. Pompeo went over there and spoke with him twice. And then President Trump comes. For me, I was thinking there's no way that President Trump would come over to Singapore, come over to see him, unless something was on the verge of being done and making it a real historical moment with a photo opportunity. And so I was very hopeful that they were actually going to have a pretty successful talk.
Well, I agree. I mean, the chief executive doesn't usually get involved until it's the closing moments, and maybe he went to more or less, if you will, close the deal.
Yeah.
I tend to think that what's his name? I can't pronounce it. Kim Jong-un.
Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un.
Okay. Number
Just
7.
Say Kim.
Okay, Kim. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, I kind of think that maybe he and his predecessors are accustomed to making threats and getting something out of it. Never really intending to change their objectives, but just if we make enough noise, rattle sabers long enough, the United States and the West will give us something. And I think that Trump's rhetoric going back several months, may have left him with the impression, this guy might be just the one to actually go across the line and get into some kind of military action. So maybe once again, Trump has been underestimated and we'll see, underappreciated for his abilities to bring people to the table. It certainly worked this time. And a lot of people never thought it could be done. Some people are still saying it shouldn't be done. I was watching some of the media reports about all of this, and you could just see it in their face. They could not bring themselves to say that this was a potentially good thing. They just, it was this and it was that. And I get, because I'm this way, we need to be cautious about this. We need to be, let's see what happens. Let's see what the days and weeks and months produce. But at the very least, it is a step in the right direction, I think, notwithstanding that the guy's a murderer, notwithstanding the guy's a dictator. I get all of that. But I was thinking a lot about Ronald Reagan this morning. And how, Reagan, when he went into the office of president, how he was tough on communism. He was calling the Soviet Union the evil empire and all these kinds of things. And people were telling me you shouldn't ratchet up the rhetoric and all this kind of stuff. And yet somehow or another, he and his administration were able to bring Mikhail Gorbachev to the table. And in my view, first God, but as far as God's agents on the earth, Ronald Reagan and his administration were the tools that he used to bring down the Iron Curtain. And this has that feel to me. I'm not going to be dogmatic about that, but it just has that feel about it. We'll see what fruit comes out of this.
Well, and for all the naysayers and all the mainstream media and the liberal left, they may not want to acknowledge, or they may want to keep saying, but we'll see what comes out of it. Not saying that you're liberal, but I'm saying the other people on the left they don't even want to acknowledge that a meeting has taken place.
I know. They couldn't bring themselves to say it,
No, they couldn't. And if for anything, no matter which side of it you are on and whether or not you believe anything is going to come out of it, the mere fact that this meeting took place should be enough for people to say, this is amazing. This is, a great first step. Which
it almost borders on miraculous. And that's what convinces me that the hand of God may be at work here. And there's something I want to go into in that regard, but let's talk about what's going on right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the vice president last night asked everybody about an hour or so before the meeting. He asked Christians to pray. He did come out and ask Christians to pray. And I think that had a great part in what happened and the success of what happened with that many people getting together. Now, I want to read some of the comments here that Linda is saying we can't believe the MSM propaganda. Absolutely true. Jean said, I think there was heavy intercession by Korean and Chinese believers during the meeting.
That's what I want to get into.
Okay. We'll
Go ahead.
We'll come back to that. Yahweh is definitely using Trump, Jonathan said. Linda says they're saying Barack Obama laid the groundwork for this meeting. That's really laughable. Wanda said...
Yeah, I'm laughing.
Yeah, I know. Wanda is saying it showed that he ain't playing, meaning Trump isn't playing. And Linda said, at least we have a conversation we did not have before. And that's my point exactly, Linda, that they can't even say that this conversation taking place was something amazing. Robin said she loved Reagan. Beth said possible God intervened and convinces North Korea that Trump meant what he said, would use deadly force, just like God turned the enemy armies of Israel against themselves. Absolutely true. Jonathan said he keeps them off guard, meaning Trump does. And Robin said that's why she doesn't watch mainstream media, because it's propaganda. Wanda said a lot of things that have gone on with this administration has been miraculous, to say the least. And I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you, Wanda, on that. And then Jonathan said they are wondering what excuse they can come up with now on the liberal left. One thing I wanted to get back to, Bill, and before you start talking about what you want to go into, when you were talking about saber rattling and all that, and looking like the meeting wasn't even going to take place, President Trump has this way of knowing people and reading them well. I think that is one of his strengths, that he can judge a person, know what needs to be done. And sometimes we saw that during the campaign, where he would say things that people would go, oh my gosh, why is he saying that? I'm not sure I like that. He could put it a different way. Sometimes when you're dealing,
I would have been one of those people, by the way.
I know. And I was at times as well, but I looked beyond it and understood. I got to the point where I understood what he was doing and why he was doing it the way he was. And I think that's what happened here with the dictator. As Dennis Rodman said about Kim, he is a big kid. And he is. And I think that's what big kids do, is like, well, I'm going to come after you with my, whatever. I'm going to blow you up. And it was kind of a back and forth, if you will, with Trump treating him like the kid that he was acting, but saying, we're not going to let this go forward. And I think at that point that Kim had some amount of respect for him, that he thought, wow, I'm going to back off. Now, Jonathan said, Linda said, last day miracles. And that's what she thinks is happening. And go with what you wanted to talk about, Bill.
Well, I want to go back to, the idea, Trump says things that we go, wow, what do you say that for? Okay, I won't say this every time, because there were things he said during the campaign that I just absolutely vehemently thought were wrong, disagreed with, and all those kinds of things. But here's what occurred to me over the weekend, leading up to this meeting, and some of the other things that we've talked about on the program that Trump and his administration have been responsible for. The thing that always bugged me about Trump from the beginning was he's profane. Let's face it. He can be vulgar at times. He's not the most humble guy in the world. All right. I mean, I'm not saying that to be disparaging. It's a statement of fact. But here's what occurred to me. There is no doubt that God is using him and this administration to advance God's purposes. And I'll get into why I think this North Korean thing is such an important thing as it relates to God's purposes in just a moment. But, you think about the embassy being moved and things like that to Jerusalem. Here God is taking someone that is at times vulgar. He can be profane. He can be brazen. He can be definitely unorthodox, and he's shaking everything up, everybody up. I mean, he doesn't play by the rules of the game as they have been established in times past, as far as politics go, as far as diplomacy goes. He's just turning everything over. So here's what occurred to me. The thing I do appreciate and respect about the man is that he says what he thinks. Whatever's on his mind at that time, he says, and that's what a lot of people don't know how to handle. So that being said, he is and his administration are making advancements. He's making a difference. And I'm wondering, taking somebody like that to show us that if he can be brave, if he can be courageous, if he can do the unorthodox, and if he can take strides forward, and if he can go against the grain and be used of God to advance his purposes, then how much more should we as his people be bold, be courageous, be willing to take those risks, be willing to speak out and go against the grain of the trends in culture and the way everything's going? Because a lot of Christians they're just, they're shrinking violets. So right. That's one thing that occurred to me about how God is using Donald Trump to make a statement to believers. You don't like him. You think he's vulgar. You think he's profane. Yeah, I'm using him to make advancements. I want to use you. I want to use you. You speak up. You do something. You be bold. You be courageous. So that's one thing that occurred to me, about all of the events leading up to this meeting. But now going back to the purposes of God, I think it's wonderful news that we've taken a step back from, the possibility of a military confrontation with North Korea. I think it's great that we've taken a step toward perhaps officially ending the Korean War. I think it's a fantastic development that the remains of U.S. servicemen who've been lost for going on 60 years, 70 years now, for those families to be able to have their loved ones come home. All those are great things. Beyond that, we need to understand that there have been a lot of North Korean Christians who have been living under oppression, who have been persecuted, and who have kept the faith. They've paid such a great price just to call on the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And there's no doubt in my mind that like those believers in China and other oppressed nations, they've been crying out to God for deliverance, just like the people who lived behind the Iron Curtain 30, 40 years ago. These people have been crying out, and others have been crying out on their behalf. And all of this just has the feel that the hand of God is bringing this wall down. Isn't it ironic that Trump's campaign was about building a wall, but he, more than anybody else in recent history, is tearing walls down? Isn't that interesting? Or that God is using them to do that? Right. I find that the epitome of irony. But all this has the feel of God's hand at work. And beyond all the political things, I personally believe that at the heart of this is God's heart is to deliver those people from oppression and persecution. That's what I see going on. And that's what makes tears well up in my eyes at the thought that God would use the leader of the United States, an unconventional, unorthodox, yes, at times vulgar and profane man, to be the one that he uses to perhaps bring down that wall so that the oppressed, persecuted believers in North Korea and perhaps other places will have an opportunity of liberty, an opportunity to worship in public without fear of retribution. I just feel like perhaps that the hour of their deliverance might be at hand, and that's what excites me.
Well, it's amazing that you should say that, because this morning on the show that I had earlier, it's exactly what I was saying. So I think there are a lot of people probably starting to feel that way. My thoughts are that God is using Trump to give the people, just like you said, in North Korea, an opportunity to be able to come freely to worship God, because now they have to worship Kim. That is their God. Right. That's who they are taught you must worship. And I really do believe, just like you do, I feel the same way, that God is opening that door. You know, you've had people criticizing Trump and saying, oh, why would that, America want to go talk to a dictator? Why would you do that? Well, I'm sorry, but if you want to get to the dictator's people and you don't want to do a regime change, which this administration does not want to do, then you've got to change the heart and the minds of the dictator. And you do that one step at a time. And you must talk to them to do that. And I think in that way, it can start opening the door. I don't know how long it will take before those people in North Korea are freed from the oppression and the torture and everything else that they're under now and able to worship God. But they had to start somewhere. And I do believe, like you, this is the first step to achieving that. And I think that's God's part, if not the main part of God's purpose in all of this.
Well, again, we approach this cautiously, because I'm not suggesting for a moment that Kim has just, melted away and he's going to be a good guy tomorrow. I mean, and he's a dictator. He's a despot. He's a tyrant. He's accustomed to certain things. But at the same time, the hand of God at work can make the impossible possible.
Yes.
And like I said, I just have this sense of that. Now, he may be coming at this thinking, well, I'm going to make them think this and I'm going to make them think that, but this is really what I'm going to do. I won't be surprised if there are developments like that. You think back to the time of Reagan and Gorbachev and the meeting at Reykjavik in Iceland. I think that's the one that Reagan got up and just walked out, said, we're leaving, because Gorbachev tried to pull some stuff. But eventually the wall did come down. Germany, if you recall, which was East and West Germany at that time, was eventually reunited. Isn't that an interesting component of this? How people are even talking about the Korean Peninsula being reunited. Now, some people say, well, that'll never happen. Well, Germany was reunited. I'm just saying it has the sense that the hand of God's at work. And I'm thankful that the president is willing to take that chance. I think I heard him say something to this effect. There's not a whole lot he's unwilling to do if it means that we can achieve peace and not have war. I think that's what motivated Reagan. If we keep going down this road, eventually there's going to be a conflict, and that's not going to be good for anybody. Reagan didn't give away the farm in order to achieve that. And I have this sense that Trump's not the kind of person who's going to give everything away just to have his name in the history books. There are others who have done that,
right?
In not so distant past, who give everything away, and the particular adversary they wanted to make peace with didn't give up anything. I think we've just heard about some of those kinds of situations.
The Iran agreement. Okay.
Exactly. And I don't see Trump bowing down to world leaders.
No.
I don't see that at all. So I don't have anything bad to say about the man in this regard. I think that he is, yes, taking a risk, but who knows what might become of this. And again, beyond the nuclear aspect of it, beyond the military aspect of it, beyond, all of the political components of this, I think the most important thing is the hearts and the lives of those people who've been living under the iron fist of a dictator all these many decades. Maybe God's moving on their behalf.
And I feel extremely optimistic. I really do. Not naive optimism, but just a very optimistic, because I do believe that God's hand is strongly on what's going on right now, and that things are moving. It's the same feeling that I felt when I knew for myself personally, when I prayed and knew that I was supposed to vote for President Trump. It's that same feeling that I got, and the same amount of optimism. So we'll see where it goes. Like you said, now you read some of the comments. Linda said, do you believe he came to the table for support because they are desperately in need? I honestly think that Kim saw that this is an opportunity, and he was told by others, maybe in China, in other places, that this is your opportunity. I think Dennis Rodman may have spoken to him and said, this is your shot. And President Trump said, and Pompeo, you get one shot. This is it. There's so many things, so many great things that could happen to you. And if you want it, now is the time. If you pass it up, you've lost it, and you're not going to get it back. And so I think that was a lot of what he did, and saw that this is the opportunity. Now, Linda said the temple is next. Sharon said, pray for President Trump, because his haters are going to try to stop him, because he's a president that won't bend to the New World Order and one world government. Wanda said, I agree with Bill, but I think it took that type of person to get the job done, when you were talking about how Trump was an unconventional person.
Well, I'm seeing that.
Yeah. And Jonathan said Trump doesn't give in. Lisa said the temple means the rapture is near than the tribulation. Wanda said, let's see, everybody was saying their amens. Jonathan said, let's get on board the Trump train. A lot of people saying, I think you're right, Bill. Agree with Bill. The example is not necessarily about living separate apart, but about being bold, being set apart, but about being bold. Trump fits the paradigm of Yahoo.
Yehu, yeah.
I was going to say Yahoo,
he was the one who he went up to the house that Jezebel was living in, and some people threw her out the window.
Oh.
Yeah, so he's the one who put an end to Jezebel, more or less.
Okay. And then Darlene said, also prepare for what we will face as a result of that. Attacks will come. Jonathan said to give America a reprieve from judgment, a return to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. North Korea's dictator has something up his sleeve, Linda feels. And
I don't doubt that.
Yeah. Again,
we'll see.
and you're right for doubting. I'm not saying you're not, but at this moment I have absolutely no doubt, and that's not like me. That it's not like me to be that way.
I don't doubt that what we're seeing is monumental, important, and exciting. I don't doubt that. Mm-hmm. We'll see what Kim, does. My doubts are with him, not that God is doing something. My doubts are with that he's being, totally forthright and upfront. We'll see. We'll see.
I honestly think that, and we'll see it very quickly. Kim is supposed to go back and immediately start sending back the remains of the 6,000 people who died during the Korean War. Said it, he would do that right away. Also, President Trump is not going in this with being going to be used by this man, because if the disarmament, the denuclearization, that is going to come with verification and not from North Korea, unlike with Obama did with Iran, allowed them to just police themselves, if you will, about their own getting rid of weapons of mass destruction. Now, let's see. Linda said perhaps he's hoping to be head of North and South, who can know a man's motive. I don't get that feeling, but I don't know how willing he will be to allow people to have free will. That's going to be the real decision. How much freedom will he actually want to give those under him in North Korea? And that will take God totally making that movement if it happens.
Well, if God is behind this, that's where it's headed.
Exactly.
God's not going to leave something unfinished.
Exactly. And Wanda says, if Kim has anything up his sleeve, God will reveal what is that in that secret. And that's a good point.
I agree with that too. And that's what I mean. If this is the hand of God, and it's hard for me to think otherwise. Yeah. But if this is the hand of God, it's not going to be done halfway. Right. It might be that it's what he does is only for a season, because we already see now that, Russia is trending back to the more oppressive side, the totalitarian side, not to the degree it was under Stalin and Khrushchev and all these guys, but it's trending back that way because that's what they're accustomed to, quite frankly. But if God is doing this, he will not leave it undone. The walls that must come down will come down in order for his people that are in that country to be delivered from their oppression, and beyond that, to be able to share the good news with those other North Koreans who are living in oppression, not only to Kim, but to false religion, to secularism, to all these things. So that's the big picture as far as I'm concerned.
And when those people, if and when they taste freedom,
it'll be a movement.
It will be a movement.
Just like when they started chipping down the Berlin Wall, it got to a point that, Gorbachev and the Soviets and the Eastern Bloc countries and Ceausescu, they couldn't do anything about it because it reached a tipping point.
Yeah.
And everything began to happen very quickly. That's the sense I have right today, that things are getting ready to happen very, very quickly.
I feel that way too. Now, Luann said Kim would be a fool to mess with Trump and our military, and I agree with that. And she said, I pray for the Korean people. Jonathan said, keep praying for President Trump all the time, that he hears what Yahweh is telling him. And Linda said, my suspicion is because he has flipped from hate to an open congenially, that she's feeling that, I guess, Kim is more open than he was. And but again, as a dictator, people were talking about today that a lot of his ancestors have Christian roots, which I did not know. And
really? Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all I was going to say. I had not heard that, but that's a positive.
Now that's fascinating, and here's why. And this is a thought that popped in my head, and I left it. I didn't say anything about it. There is a story, and I keep going back to the Reagan-Gorbachev thing. Mm-hmm. There is a story that supposedly Gorbachev recited, in some magazine or some news article or what have you, that when he was a child, that his mother, who was a Christian, would bake him cakes and put Bible verses on the cakes.
Wow.
That was in his background. That was in his history. And so I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if we found out that Kim has some kind of ancestral connection to the truth? And so you saying that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, there were people that were mentioning that this morning. I want to go and do research on myself for that. And they were also saying that he was he's well educated. And maybe it's come to a point where he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. At being a dictator, all the stress.
It's a dangerous job.
It's a dangerous job. And maybe, somebody's got to stop the cycle. And I don't want to give him too much credit because he is a dictator. He did kill people, and all that. But I don't know. And I don't think any of us know yet what God has done on his heart. If anything, we don't know.
Well, it's not impossible, Susan, because there is a dictator mentioned in the Bible who killed many, many people. He destroyed Jerusalem. He destroyed the temple. And yet God moved upon him, and to the point that he recognized the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as the Most High God. And he humbled himself before God. So, it's not impossible. It's really easy for us. And boy, I never would have believed this in a million years, that I would actually take to heart some things that Dennis Rodman, of all people, said.
I know.
But stranger things have happened. Perhaps we have no idea what God has in store or what God intends. Maybe he'll bring an end to Kim,
Yeah.
Maybe the love of God can reach somebody even as wicked as this guy. I mean, it's blowing my mind, some of the things that are happening this morning.
But isn't it exciting? I mean, that's my excitement, because I'm watching God's hand and God move things. And I'm excited about that. I mean, I really am. I think what in the last days that they say, miracles will happen. You will see miracles that almost like they will become commonplace. And I don't know, Bill, it's like when we talked about in the very beginning, for me, this was an absolute miracle that even took place, that they even met in Singapore, let alone did all that they did. So I'm excited about how much I am seeing God's hand move in this world at this time. Now, Chesney said Saul before Paul. And that's there's a great example. And Luann said, nothing is impossible with God, and amen. Now, getting back to Dennis Rodman, I will have to say, I had zero respect for Dennis Rodman. I thought he was just kind of a crazy, quirky, in your face kind of guy that didn't care what he said, what he did, or anything else. And
well, to be honest, he is.
He is. But from what I saw in that video last night of a man standing there with his MAGA hat on, crying, tears coming out of his eyes over knowing that, in his mind, he said, I saw this happening. And he said, I'll have to tell you something. For those who didn't see the video, he said, when I went to North Korea the first time, he said, I was just going there. It's like a charitable thing to do. Yeah, I'll come there. We'll play basketball, whatever. We'll hang out. Just kind of a charity event. And he said, when I was there, he was moved by the people in North Korea. And he said, I was naive. And he said, I came away from there like a changed man, basically. And people were giving death threats to him and everything else. And interestingly enough, he said, Obama wouldn't even give me the time of day when I wanted to talk to him about this. And he said, I knew in my heart that this was going to happen and saw this coming. And the man stood there on video and wept. My respect for Dennis Rodman shot through the roof, because I had no respect for the man. And I respect the way that, his, what he went over there to do, how he allowed God to change him, and what he was hoping would happen with all of this.
Well, as I was watching the video, my first thing, and I'm bad about this, it's hard for me sometimes to get past the shrapnel that's in his face, and like he was standing too close to a hand grenade when it went off.
I know.
The man has Okay. His past is as checkered and colorful and causes me to wince just as much as some of the things that Trump has done.
Right.
And this is really what God is really impacting my heart about. If he's doing this, and again, I can't get around the fact that I believe that God is doing this.
Yeah.
Look who he's using.
I know.
Look who he's
so
using.
Great.
And
so
that
great.
should be both an inspiration to us and an indictment.
Yeah.
That look who he's using. People who are willing, whether they acknowledge him or not. He's using these people that we go, ugh.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's because there's so few of us who are willing to step up and be used. And that humbles me. And to think about that God would do this on behalf of these nameless, faceless people who are living under the oppression of the North Korean government and others around the world. You know, what they have to go through, what they have to endure just to get together and sing a song or read from the Bible. When I think about that, it makes me wonder if I'm even saved. You know, I just, it's overwhelming to me right now.
It is. I mean, it's truly inspirational. Now, Renee said, are we coming to the greater Exodus soon?
Well, the word soon is relative, you know, but I do believe that what we read about in Scripture, that there's going to come a day when he's going to gather all of his people from all of the nations, not just one or two. It makes sense. It's logical to assume that before that happens, that all these people in all these nations, including nations like North Korea, China, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, there's developments there that people are saying that it's possible that churches could be established in Saudi Arabia, for Pete's sake. It only makes sense that there would come a time when God would orchestrate things whereby those people that he loves, even though we don't tend to love them, he still loves them.
Yeah.
He wants to give them an opportunity. Boy, I got chill bumps talking about all this.
I did too. I just had a chill when you were doing that. I was like, ooh, because again, that's why I'm so excited, because God is working in ways that we haven't seen, or we haven't acknowledged, at least in a really, really long time. And it's so obvious to me that it is God. Now, Beth said, for with God, nothing is impossible. Linda said, I don't think Rodman shops at Sears.
Okay, that makes the list. That makes
the list right next to Marlene's.
Our Hall of Fame for comments.
Oh my gosh. Teresa said Christians are coming together and praying for people, even our enemies. And Wanda said, that's what I was thinking, all these piercings when you were talking about Rodman. And it's hard for us to look beyond, and sometimes we really need to. Goes to show man looks on the outward and God looks at the heart, Wanda said. Wanda, that's a great point. And Lisa said God has always used misfits. Linda said God uses the unlovely all the time. Chezzy said, but doesn't God always use the people we think are kind of yucky? And Lisa said, he's using me too. Why me?
Amen to that.
Amen. We all think that. Monique said it was quite emotional watching Dennis Rodman, thinking about his experience in North Korea. Being from Chicago, I was a huge Bulls fan. And yes, always thought he was kind of quirky, but always heard he had a heart of gold that he wore on his sleeve. And we saw that last night.
The statement that Carolyn just put up, she's paraphrasing a scripture where it says that God uses the foolish to confound the wise.
Yeah.
I'll admit it. I'm confounded.
Yeah.
No, I won't say confounded. I'm amazed.
I'm amazed too.
I'm just blown away. You know, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You know, we don't know what development's going to, come about in the next few days. But I do believe it's really important that as believers, we need to recognize the season we're in. Mm-hmm. Jerusalem is acknowledged as the capital of Israel. The United States Embassy moves and then opens its embassy in Jerusalem, Israel. Other nations follow suit. Just a few months ago, North Korea was making threats. Today, the leader of North Korea, a murderer, a despot, a tyrant, all those things, sits down and signs an agreement to denuclearize. Is that the proper term?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
North Korea. Yeah. To return the remains of servicemen who've been there for 60, 70 years. To at least posture himself to say that we're willing to work at coming into the community of nations, to not be a threat. Maybe he's lying through his teeth, but as it's already been pointed out, he may be lying through his teeth, but God has the last word. So it's just amazing. We need to recognize the season we're in. God's doing something. We need to wake up.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too, Bill, is right after all this happened, when President Trump came out, I was watching it at 2 a.m, believe it or not. I laying in bed trying to wake up. I do believe it, Susan.
I do believe it. This woman never sleeps, y'all. She never sleeps.
Oh my God. But I was listening to him and he turned from North Korea and he's like, Iran, you're next. You know, it's like, we can work deals. We can do things. Your people need, you to change too. It was like he didn't just say, Iran, you're off the table. Forget you. You're out of here. The deal we had was horrible. We're not going to talk to you again. It was like he was opening doors once again with Iran to do a deal this time that would be fair for his people. And Netanyahu a couple of days ago came out and said, hey, Iran, I understand you need water. We have water. Everybody like this is coming to the table and trying to bring people together, trying to open doors that have never been opened before, and not using regime change, but just trying to change the people and their way of thinking about things. And it is absolutely amazing to watch.
Well, again, we go back to Reagan. His ideology was, or philosophy in this was, you have to deal with the leaders of the Soviet Union, but the idea was to get into the hearts and minds of the people in the Soviet Union.
Right.
That's where the power really lay. It was among the people. And, from a spiritual point of view, what God wanted to do and could do in the hearts and minds of people. And again, when it reached a tipping point, the leaders of the Soviet Union and Romania and all those communist bloc nations, they just had to sit back and watch it happen.
Yeah.
Again, I just have that sense again. And if you think about it, that was about 30 years ago when all this started happening in the late 80s, 88, 89, into 90. Wow. It's just going to be an interesting few months and years to see what develops.
Now, Carol and Liz are kind of asking the same thing. It says they were saying, does the Bible speak about why the Creator uses the people he does? Liz says, why does God use the foolish me? Because then it is known that it is God working, not us. God shows himself. That's an extremely good point. It
is. And I do think, Susan, that as believers, we need to be very careful to, yes, honor those that God is using, but ascribe glory and honor and credit, if you will, to God.
Yes.
Because he's the one who raises up leaders. He's the one that brings them down. He raises up empires and he causes them to fall. So it's really important that we ascribe glory and honor to the one who is due for any good thing that is developing. And that is not to take away from the fact that people, whoever they may be, whether the president of the United States or the housewife who's raising her children in a godly way, there have to be those people who respond to God's call and the purpose for which they've been placed on this planet. If God is using Donald Trump, then I would suggest to you that all the years that he spent in business and industry and making deals, all of that was preparation for what he's doing now.
Absolutely. And the way I look at it, I don't care who you are, you, me, Bill, the president of the United States or whatever, we would have nothing. We would be nothing without God. Donald Trump couldn't have done anything he did yesterday, but for God. And I think you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No. I'm just thinking as you're talking, but go ahead.
But I think it's also interesting that we got Tillerson out, Pompeo in, and Pompeo is a real staunch, if you want to put it, Christian. And I think that's amazing. And it was only when that occurred did things really start to move.
Going back to, Nebuchadnezzar, the things that happened in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, and to him particularly, wasn't because of his Babylonian or Chaldean magicians and advisors and wise men. It's because he had a guy by the name of Daniel who was given access to him, who could speak into his life. He had people like, we call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their Hebrew names are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But he had these kind of men who were living and demonstrating a godly example before him that made an impression upon him. So I'm kind of wondering, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, not only do we see that God is using Donald Trump, working through Donald Trump, and we believe that. We say those things in faith. We've already seen evidence of it, the embassy in Jerusalem, and now we're seeing some other things happening. But not only, and this is what I believe, not only is he going to work through Donald Trump, but I'm choosing to believe that he's working in Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that those qualities and characteristics that aren't so pleasant, maybe this is God's way of getting through to him in a more personal way. And I'm not suggesting the man doesn't know God or know about God, doesn't talk to God. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I believe not only is he working through him, but I believe he wants to and is working in him. And you brought it up, Pompeo and others went out, others came in, and some of these others that are coming in are at least reported to be devoted Christians. Mike Pence. Yep. It's just fascinating what's going on.
It is fascinating. And I don't know why it's the first time in history that it seems to be aligning that way and becoming so obvious. I don't know. I didn't feel this way under Reagan. Maybe my walk with God was different and I didn't see it. I don't know, but I just don't remember it being like that or feeling that way with Reagan. It seemed more political. And, to me, when
his spiritual thing was more subtle. That's for sure.
For sure. And this one, to me, while, I'm acknowledging the political aspects of it, to me, this is so far beyond politics that I'm not even looking at it as political. I think some of the people that are involved, they don't even know how big this really is because God is involved in it and God is moving everything. And that's the part that I'm watching. And I love that. Let's see.
Well, that's why you and I are on here talking about all this, because CNN and MSNBC and even Fox are not going to talk about those kinds of things.
Well, CNN and MSNBC are talking about IHOP because, that's more important than this.
Or IHOB.
Yeah, IHOB, because we can have burgers.
They didn't even, it's not even International House of Breakfast. Come on, McFly.
Well, for them, that's the only thing that's important today. And Marlene said, I'll have to catch the replay. We missed Marlene's comments, but we did have someone else's comments just almost as good as Darlene saying that Rodman doesn't shop at Sears. So that was really good. I can't remember who said it right now, but may have been Darlene or Linda. I'm not sure. But Luann said President Trump's uncle was a professor at MIT who apparently knew about nukes. That was interesting to her. And God prepares our life to face things for this time and season. Jonathan said God used the he used the king of Babylon. And Carol said that God is growing Donald Trump. And I believe, just like you said, I do believe that. And Linda said Reagan was the bomb, not literally, but of course he was the bomb. I'm just joking there. Monique said, I think you are correct, Bill. And I also believe God is working through not just President Trump, but everyone involved. We must continue to have faith and pray for them no matter what the outcome. Yes.
Amen. We just because we have an exciting development doesn't mean we go back to sleep now. To the contrary,
Exactly.
if we're awakened and alerted to the fact that it looks like God's on the move, then boy, we better be ready to move with him. If the cloud is moving or if the pillar of fire is moving, we have to move with it.
Yeah, and that's why, too, I think that when we look back at all this, when we look back at what happened yesterday, when we look back at the president of the United States shaking the hand of a dictator that I don't even know who's ever been out of North Korea that long, or, and is going to possibly come to the United States if all goes well. I think we have to not look at it as something that politically happened. I do think that we need to give all glory to God. We do need to look at it as what God has done, what God is going to do with what happened yesterday. And do we have a role in it? What's our part in all of this? Praying, of course, for North Korea and that it goes forward in God's will. But what else is it, Bill, could that we be involved in with this?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here. My dogs are going crazy. I thought somebody was driving up. Sorry. God always has somebody in the right place at the right time before there is a dramatic shift in situations. For instance, the boy Samuel grew up in the tabernacle and was already in the right place at the right time when destruction came to the house of Eli and his two sons, Hophni and Pinchas, and they were moved out of the way. Well, he had to have somebody ready to step into the place to lead the people. So he always has the right person, in the right place, at the right time, ready to step into that situation that he creates. And so if this figurative wall in North Korea comes crumbling down, I mean, every time God brings his people into a place to possess something, walls have to come down. Jericho had to fall. It was a stronghold. And the people never had to use one battering ram. All they had to do was obey God, march around the city, do exactly what he said, and the walls came down. So if this figurative wall comes down, obviously, then there are people behind that wall that God wants to reach. There are people that he wants to help, and he always does it through other people. Mm-hmm. So there's no doubt in my mind that already he's got people positioned in South Korea, ministries that have been going to South Korea for some time, working in harmony with it, and even working behind the scenes with North Koreans. Mm-hmm. I think he's already got the logistical aspect of things probably pretty much in place. And it's just going to be that when the time comes, God's people like you and me who have the means compared to people around the world to support those kinds of efforts need to be prepared to do that. So yes, we need to pray that God's purposes, his will go forward, that there are no impediments. And if this is his will, then we as a people need to be prepared to respond to it, to assist it, to support it prayerfully and financially. Because that's what happened in the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed and ministries were allowed to go in, it needed support. It needed prayer support. It needed personnel support. Needed financial support. So those are some practical things that we will do. In the meantime, it's already been said here, but we need to pray for the president. We need to pray for the administration. We need to pray for those people who are, getting into the nuts and bolts of this process. We need to pray that God would soften the heart of the North Korean leaders. We need to pray for them that God would soften their hearts, and that this what happened this morning. Well, that's the explosion, yeah. But there's going to be a lot of things to do after the dust of this settles. So yes. That's the practical things that I see.
It's interesting, too. I heard that Franklin Graham has been going to North Korea, and I didn't know that at all. And Franklin Graham is one of the people that has surrounded the president and been sort of there as a mentor guide, if you will, for the president in spiritual matters, God things. So Linda said, isn't it interesting that Reagan and Trump were real and led by their heart and have monumental things accomplished because of it? Jonathan said, remember both men, meaning Trump and Reagan, were weren't real politicians, but both could be used by Yahweh. And if he can use them, he can use anybody. And let's see, we can take the good news to the people for as long as the door is open, Liz said. Linda said, like Esther, for such a time as this. And when you were talking about there's somebody already there and, waiting, and somebody that God's going to use. Linda said, Trump gives thanks to God for those who support him. Darlene, since we need to trust his power, also the authority of men is temporary. Very good. And like Boaz, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Just Linda said, like Boaz for Ruth and Rahab for the spies.
Yeah,
she was finishing up with Esther. But go ahead.
Rahab. Yeah, what Darlene said about we need to trust his power because the power or the authority of men is temporary. This, in my mind, is connected to what we were saying at the very beginning about how somebody as unorthodox as Trump is, nevertheless possesses a boldness. Let's face it. Bravado, if you even want to say it's that. Nonetheless, something about the man says, we're going to go and we're going to try this and we're going to upset the apple cart. We're going to do things differently. And, and here you are seeing him sit down with the leader of North Korea. We as believers need to recognize that the adversary is out there, yes, but he's working through people. He's working through mere men, and their authority is, as Darlene said, temporary, and it's limited. The book of Job, if it doesn't teach us anything else, it teaches us that, yes, God will allow the adversary to come against us. But even when he allows the adversary to come against us, he puts him on a leash. He says you can go only so far. And what we need to recognize is what the Bible says is actually true. Greater is he who lives in me than the one who's in the world. And so again, I'm just overwhelmed with this notion that God is using people that most believers would, they would shirk away from. They would find fault with. They would, God can't use that person. And yet he is. And perhaps it's also to demonstrate to you and to me that if they can be bold, why shouldn't I be?
Yeah. And Wanda said he's going to equip us, though, too. God is going to equip us with the ability to do what we have to do. And people, a lot of people say, well, I can't be as bold as Trump. I can't do what Trump does. You don't have to do what he does. You don't have to be as bold. You just, as Bill said, too, you just have to be willing to do what God wants you to do and then let God do it. Step out of the way of yourself and let God work through you to do it. Linda says,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Be as bold as a lion. Maybe is that what you were going to say?
I was just going to say, we see in Scripture that God's people were always encouraged to be bold. Don't fear. Be courageous. God's with you.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And we as human beings, I know I do. I forget that sometimes. I'm in the flesh and I forget that. And I need to stop doing that. Linda said a huge weight was lifted when Trump became president. I felt the same thing, Linda. And Jonathan said, again, he used Paul. God used Paul. Absolutely he did. And I, again, Bill, I'm excited to be alive at this time and seeing what's happening in the world. Never before in my lifetime have I seen the type of things that are happening right now. Never seen that. Now, Monique said, pray for God's clarity and pray for his wisdom upon you. Absolutely.
Amen.
But I think, in the days and months and years to come and things like that, we're going to see, while we see a lot of bad things happening, I think the miracles that we're seeing on the other hand far outweigh the negative that we're seeing and the negativity that we see even in the mainstream media on the liberal left who fail to acknowledge the goodness that they're seeing. It just, as we said at the very beginning, it kills them to even say that a meeting took place or that something might be happening here that they don't quite understand, but they want more. They want more of it. Hopefully their hearts and minds are going to change as well.
Well, I'm going to share this with you, and I do this with much trepidation, but there is, and I know we're short on time, but there is a concept in Judaism as it relates to the shofar, the ram's horn, the biblical trumpet. The idea in Judaism is that when we blow the ram's horn, when we blow the shofar, it confuses the enemy. He doesn't know what's going on. He's confounded. what Trump and God through Trump is doing is leaving all these people confounded. They're confused. They have no idea what's going on. Yep. So make of that what you will.
Yep, absolutely. And we are out of time. This has been a great discussion today with everybody. Your comments, your questions, absolutely loved it. Please keep that going. Let's all, as a group who come in here, let's all continue to pray for this country, this president, for what's happening, what God is doing through everyone, that we're seeing and through us as well. Let's pray for that to continue. We hope to see you again next week. Until then, God bless you. Take care.
Hey, Gene Henriska.
See you soon.